Fantastic. Hi, Charles. How are you?
Good. How have you been, Justin?
I'm doing well. Will you remind me where you're calling in from? Where are you right now?
I'm based in Torrance, California.
Oh, what is? Okay, are you from that area?
Yeah, yeah. Well, originally from New York, but most of my life out here now.
Okay, I know I
Yeah.
had you in the Northeast for some reason, and so,
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, I'm out there a lot, so that might be it.
but you consider Torrance home, SoCal is home.
Yeah, yeah. As of now.
Okay, as of now. How long were you? But you grew up. Where did you grow up? Where was your upbringing?
Yeah, I grew up, immigrated to New York when I was super young, and then stayed there through good portion of grade school, and then moved out to LA and just all around Los Angeles.
Do you have like an affinity for the Northeast, or is it just
Yeah, I
relationships?
do. I still have a bunch of family out there, and so
Okay.
I go out there pretty often for client work. I'm there like almost every month, so I guess I'm
Okay.
still
Wow.
attached. Yeah, yeah,
You're bi-coastal in that way.
yeah, yeah. Hey, Justin, I have a hard time like hearing you. I don't know if it's just me, Dan, but do you hear his volume okay?
I can boost it a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah, yeah, that's a little bit better. Yeah,
Hey, look at that. We did it. I turned a knob, and we made it better. So back and forth bi-coastal. How significant for you has place been? In other words, like immigrated to New York as a kid, grade school in New York, and then what actually got you to the West Coast? Your parents moved. You moved. How did that happen?
yeah. My parents had an opportunity to start a business out here, and to start a restaurant, and so obviously, being so young, I didn't have a choice. So they brought me out here to start a restaurant.
How significant is place for you in that way? In other words,
Yeah.
we'll talk about words here in a little bit. I mean, the organization or the operation, the entity I became familiar with you through is called ideation.
Hmm.
For a lot of folks, ideas are these embodied things. We'll get into that and practice and all kind of
Hmm.
stuff. But like, because the world of ideas and creativity tends to be for a lot of folks a sort of like ethereal, in the clouds type thing. How
Yeah.
significant has place and where you've lived been for you in your career over a few decades?
Yeah. I think it's essential.
Okay.
I'm with you. Ideas don't happen in a vacuum. They're
Yeah.
really shaped and informed by our environment and the places that we choose to live and work. And so, place has been pretty significant for me. Being able
Yeah.
to be here, and then, things like travel is a big part of how I refine concepts, think about ideas, think about perspectives. And so, place is a big part of my sense of what it takes to really develop a concept.
Are there places? I mean, you're sort of in. If you're in Southern California, you're close to Los Angeles, in or around Los Angeles, or you're in New York, Brooklyn, Manhattan. Those are places that are generally identified with creative exploration,
Mhm.
creative expression. It's Broadway, it's Hollywood, it's TV, it's the punk rock movement. It's like all the East Coast rap stuff is like DC and North. Are there places in the country that are more that are maybe richer, that are more, is the soil more tilled for creativity, for
Mhm.
creative thinking, for like are am I more apt to as your book suggests, to like actually be proactive about building my life if I live in a certain part of the country, whereas if I'm in like Wichita, maybe not so much. How does that work out?
Yeah, I mean, although there are definitely pockets of creativity, I enjoyed some of the creatives I've ran across in places like Minneapolis and middle of the country, like Chicago. But definitely, when you think about the rich history, even though the U.S. is relatively a short lived country so far, right? It's only been a couple of hundred
Yes.
years. But just to be on the East Coast, New York has a certain energy to it. It can be both exciting and cutthroat and forward
Yes.
thinking. And then when you go to Silicon Valley, for example, definitely there's a certain mindset of what
Yeah.
technology means and how it grows. And having worked with various venture capital firms out there, there's a certain not only style, but a pace of life and a focus on
Yes.
what they deem matters. That's very different from, say, a Southern California environment as well. Even
Yeah.
though it's fast paced, it's kind of a laid back type of fast paced environment.
Yes, it is. That's a good diagnosis. I agree. It's laid back, fast paced.
Yeah.
They're on those bikes where you kind of you're sitting back and pedaling. You're on
Yeah.
it's that kind of pace.
I agree.
There's a section in your book that actually speaks to this. What has to do with, and we'll get into this. Trying to want to be surrounded by like-minded persons in the role of like more thoughtful community. If we're actually going to like
Yeah.
cultivate and design life, it's harder if we're not around people. I'll say it this way instead. It's harder if we're around people who have settled and shouldn't have, and who
Hmm.
are like allowing life to happen to them versus making it. You've been fortunate in that way. Are there persons in your life, like consistent persons in your life over the last few decades who provide some of that framework for you?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. They are kind of spread around the country and different parts of the world. But I think you're right. I mean, there are seasons where I intentionally spend time with individuals who can continue to push me to the edges of my thinking or
Yeah.
really push back in the way that I view the world. And so for those, I do intentionally try to go out and stay in regular contact with them. I mean, fortunately, I have a circle of friends here locally that are not just incredibly smart, but they are honest and vulnerable about the way that they live
Mm.
life and the way that they see me, and they see me beyond anything that is projected or portrayed on online.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so that's a gift as well. So different kinds of groups of people that
Yeah.
not only keep me grounded, but help me kind of grow and refill my perspective about the world.
That intentional piece is such a wild it's such a like wild simple mystery, and you get to this a little
Yeah.
bit in the book. Is
Yeah.
there are facets of life, and we're going to start with Spark here in a minute. There are facets of life or experiences of life that we maybe assume or are trained to believe are just automatic.
Mm.
That like the movement from inspiration to execution, and one of them is community and friendship.
Yeah.
That like, and I'll speak with young adults quite often. When I'm asked to speak with young adults, one of my main pushes and challenges is that up till, depending on your upbringing, up till 20, maybe 18, other people are curating your social experience. And
Mm.
that's your parents. If you're a religious person, it's your church, your synagogue, it's your mosque. It's like the world around you is putting you in a position. And then at some point, or your school, your institution, but at some point, like you're the
Mhm.
adult in the room of your own life. And if you're not actualizing, if you're not intentionalizing relationship, then you'll lose those things. Those relationships sort of, if they don't even just disintegrate, I would suggest they get kind of pulled away. So I think it's important and really curious and good. You noted, even just by way of answering the raw question, these are people you go out and seek.
Mm.
It's part of the design and execution of a better life is intentionalizing the better parts of them, and community is one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the core message of the book is I think if you're not careful, you'll find your life drifting away from what you had hoped for it to be. And I think this idea of like human agency and autonomy is so vital in the way that we can actually create life or design the type of life that we want instead of just having someone else decide whether that's technology, whether that's environments we live in, whether it's the company we work for. And those are all important elements of life. But I think, to your point, when you suddenly find yourself as an adult, you have to make some proactive decisions. And we find in our research that people who do that are generally happier, they're
Yeah.
more fulfilled, they have benefits to their health, their mental health, their physical health. And so there's all of these benefits. I think that's the way that humans were designed is that if we can actually take responsibility and stay proactive in our lives, a lot of good things come out of it. And I think that's the
Yeah.
core message of the book.
And part of what ends up happening in that is the what we mean by success and what we mean by failure shifts. That if I'm subject to a system that I'm not participating in, a system of like goals and strategies, then success and failure are predicated on like these external metrics, and someone else gets to say this is a failure, this is a success. But once I start actually designing my own life, success and failure take on very different characteristics. So I'd love to talk a little bit. Like again, we met years ago ish through the internets and things, and you were there was a conference. Dan Portnoy, producer of the show, had turned me on to what you were doing with the ideation conference.
Yeah.
And that's grown into this other thing. This not other thing. This I guess is sort of an other thing that's grown and kind of evolved over time. I'd love before we get into like the particulars of the book. I notice as I've read through your book, I'm thinking through the ways in which you've actually gone about doing the things that are in the book, and I see a bunch of that in like what ideation is now. So if you went to your website and clicked on the ideation link, it goes to this place where you get to learn about ideation as a resource for certain people. I'd love for you to talk about that journey because we're 20 years into that.
Yeah, almost. Well, our company will be officially, I think, 17 this year. So a couple of years prior to launching the business, working
Yeah.
on, yeah, a lot of those early building a tribe around the brand and such. So
So for
yeah,
folks who
it's,
wouldn't have known that at the time,
yeah,
you were doing 17, 18 years ago the kind of stuff that like folks are really trying to market now with regards to the
correct.
coaching and creativity. Will you talk a little bit for a while about ideation, the impetus for let's create a community around creative decision making and business and what have you? Like introduce people to that project.
Yeah. It was, I just happened to be an early adopter to social. I was a college professor at the time. I remember, I'm dating myself, but I used to tell students, there's this thing called Facebook. You should get on it. Part of me regrets that advice now. But I used to tell students, hey, there's this thing called Twitter. And I began to like just do social experiments online, all related around causes and, helping some of my friends who were doing startups at the time. And everything I touched happened to scale. I found that I had a knack for what moved people online to do something. And so I just kind of leveraged that. But as I was trying to build it, I started getting various offers from brands and large brands. And back then it was called guerrilla marketing. They wanted to know how I was using the tools because they had seen some of my work online and on YouTube and stuff. And so I started getting these like one-off gigs, if you will, freelancing. And then what I realized was that executives were often surrounded by people who are mostly operational in nature. And what they really needed early on in the process of an idea was a thought partner, external
Yes.
thought partner that can provide strategy or a creative team that can help kind of flesh out their concept so they can go get budget to build it out before they go to the big firms. And I noticed that not too many companies were in that space. And my premise was that in order to effectively execute in our world, you need both great strategic clarity as well as smart brand execution. And so the obvious choice would have been to, create packages and start pitching the business. But a couple of my kind of people spoke into my life, like business advice I got from well-known marketers that I got to meet online. And they said, look, Charles, don't offer anything. Just build a tribe of people. And one of those individuals was Seth Godin. And he said, just build a tribe of people and talk about the pain of executing on ideas. And basically do that for a few years.
Yeah.
Don't say anything and wait for the tribe to start asking, what do you do? And so that was a risky approach to business. Fortunately, my wife had a good corporate job. And because of that, I said, hey, can you give me 18 months to test out this concept? Let me just build it out. And so I actually ended up doing about 15 conferences in 3 years, convening around the pain of execution, around all different types of execution. Mm-hmm. And by year 2 or so, I think I had a lot of major brands showing up to our event because they had heard about the reputation, the meaningful conversations and connections. And so finally, by year 3, people started to ask, so what do you do outside of these events? And that's when I said, hey, we're actually launching a team that can help you on strategic clarity and actually flesh out ideas before you need to go to the big 4 on either side of the fence, all the big agencies. And we could help you do that. And so we actually launched with some major brands. And we've been very fortunate to keep that going for the last 17 years.
So in essence, some of what you're doing with this book,
yeah,
is that there is the thread that holds these things together is pretty clear. Like you're actually doing this on a human personal scale, the kind of thing you're doing with brands and with businesses and creating systems and metrics that maybe you're that thoughtful friend who comes along and says, hey, let's take a look at this. And instead of just managing what we have, let's think through what we have and what we want.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I am not trying to be a guru. I'm not trying to be the next, Tony Robbins or anything like that. I legitimately, the reason I started this project is I would have whether executives or entrepreneurs come and say, hey, it looks like you've kind of built the kind of life that has some level of balance, whatever that is, with my profession, my relationship with my family, some of the cause-related things we do with our family foundation. And they said, like, how did you build that? And I was like, man, I know parts of it was intentional. Other parts were probably accidental or lucky. And so I began to kind of self-reflect and thought, okay, beyond just like professional success, which is also, you could leverage the book for professional reasons. But I thought, I wanted to create a framework, not a formula, a framework to help people, walk through some things, because I think life is cyclical and we all need moments where we need to kind of realign to our values and our sense of purpose. Yes. And I thought this book would be helpful in building the kind of life that would ultimately create the impact or legacy in the world that most people desire.
The framework, and I like the distinction, like instead of a formula, it's a framework.
Yeah.
Having handles for those reflective moments can be transformative, and not just because there's a tool to do the work, but I think for a lot of my clients, I talk a lot about pace with my clients, specifically my creative clients, and not just because I don't want you to burn out, that's also true, but the ability and the will to actually hit pause, let life catch up, take an actual real look on what do we have, where have we missed, what do we have here that we didn't expect? Because like you just said, there's some things like I know we did the math and this is what we were hoping for. This showed up, but then a lot of the really good stuff no one planned on. It just ends up showing up, and we end up missing it if we don't actually make space and time to hit pause. And some of why folks don't, some of why my clients don't, is because there's a little bit of a fear of that empty space. Like what if I do hit pause, like what would I do? Like it's having a framework for to apply. Like, okay, I'm gonna like you've done with the book, like talking about spark and actualize and influence, which we're gonna get into in a second. Having a framework for how to sit in that reflective space creates it invites a little bit of courage. Like I'm going to step in here. I've got something to do with the space in between busy seasons. I'm going to intentionalize even my own reflection. Last question before we get into, go ahead. Oh, last question before we actually get into spark, actualize, and influence on a meta level here. You wrote a book. Why a book now? In other words, like there are so many ways to go about delivering information, communicating a message. There's so many different ways to like hand a tool out, so many different kinds of tools.
Yeah.
You chose a book. Why a book now? In what way is this help? In what way is like this in book form particularly helpful?
Yeah, I mean, selfishly, for me personally, a book and any type of writing form really helps me clarify what is it that I actually believe in or not. So it forces a point of reference through which I can work through my ideas. So at a very like self-centered level, I think writing a book really helps in a way that a post or an article can't. Kind of the depth of research required, all of those kinds of means, or a video. While a video may reach more on certain type of topics, but I think just understanding that for me, I just needed to start there. Secondly, I've seen kind of like from my first book, which was years ago, I still get emails from like different parts of the world of people who still somehow run into it, whether it's a public library or an old bookstore. And it's amazing the legs that a book has in a way that maybe an article on digital, because a lot of the algorithms are dated, right? And in other words, they want more relevant, recent type of information. People still find it. And I think that's such a powerful means. And I've been encouraged because I've come to see like, there's still a lot of people that read books. Yes. I know people, sometimes view like people aren't reading anymore, but I think at least the thoughtful, deeper thinking people like yourself and others, I feel like people still feel that there's value in books. And so those were some of the reasons for doing that.
Yeah, it's good. And you're getting to several things that there is something about the form. Creative thinkers can get so connected to or so hooked on, like, again, the idea and, going from like idea to impact.
Yeah.
This is moving me. I want to get it in someone else's head and put my name on it. And, but the form by which we do that communicative piece, the delivery of it, is formative for us. And so some of it has to do with like the clarity I come to. The pace of a book is different. I'll write something and then I'll actually have to step away and I'll come back and think, oh, I don't mean that at all. Like that's not actually what I wanted to say. Let me actually fix that. Versus like video doesn't have that same like reflective posture as if there's something about the form of a book writing that actually does draw something. Maybe it had, I'm going to use this word. I think it tends to form wisdom more so than a lot of other mediums do, because it is so reflective and it doesn't really bend unless someone's just typing in a prompt to ChatGPT, which is not actual writing, and we can talk about that another time. But like it forms me as I do it, and I get to see myself. This is what I'm saying, and now I know myself. So part of what you've done here, we'll come back to the framework, is you say at the heart of the journey, at the heart of this journey is to design your good life, and you provided a framework for designing your good life. Relatively simple, not easy, but I want to walk through the particulars of the framework. Spark, actualize, and influence. And what I want to do is I'm gonna kind of bring up the generality and have you reflect on a little bit, and then I'm going to point at some things that I noted in the book that I thought that were very interesting particulars about each section. And the first thing is when you use talking about spark. When you use the word spark here, what you do with the chapter is different than what someone might, what I would assume a lot of folks would figure when we talk about spark. When we talk about spark, inspiration, the flash of energy, you're not dismissing that, but you're doing something different. You mean something different that's maybe broader, that includes a little bit of that kind of flashy wow energy. But what do you mean by spark?
Yeah, I think that particular phase or element is really written for people who feel like there's some inkling that there's something on the horizon, or they feel like a transition, or they already are experiencing transition in life, and they need a little bit of that spark inspiration. But I think the the real gold in that phase is really thinking about the core like mindset of finding these ideas or refine ideas is this thing called curiosity. And I spend a whole section just writing about the science of curiosity, how the brain functions, all of the personal benefits of curiosity, and how quickly people cease to be curious as they become more professional, older,
Yes.
and all of the research backs that idea. And from there to really think about, okay, how do I ideate? Because often like the spark is a result of two or more seemingly unrelated ideas that come together and
Yes.
intersect. Maybe you take a
Yep.
portion of a skill from one previous job, and you take an inspiration from an experience you had or a conversation you're going to have with somebody, and it all kind of comes together. But without being curious to start, it's hard to find spark. So it's not about
Yes.
like waiting for that flash of this brilliant aha eureka
There you
moment.
go.
I think it's like actively putting yourself in environments where curiosity and the mindset of that is a constant in one's life.
There is like an emotional posture that's maybe less passive than we're sort of taught, or the sort
Hmm.
of like the, again, talk about passive, the odd little story that floats around about the way inspiration comes in, and even some of the way, and I won't name names, even some of the ways that writers of very successful books on creativity will talk about muses, that they just show
Mm.
up in your life and like pull you over in your car, and now you have the idea. Not that that doesn't happen, but
Yeah.
there is, though, the emotional posture of expectation, to
Hmm.
be to expect to be moved, to expect to see something,
Mm.
to sort of, which is part of the curiosity, is I'm
Yeah.
going to open myself up to something I wouldn't normally see. And then by way of practice, I'm going to be ready to grab that. It's a notebook. It's like, and there's a kind of a posture and a preparation there. The way you write about curiosity here, and I love this, in the spark phase, curiosity is the driving force behind discovery, creativity, and problem solving. I love this.
Hmm.
It's this mindset that empowers us to explore new ideas, pursue audacious goals, and work through our challenges with an open minded approach. Curiosity, great line. Curiosity isn't just a nice to have quality, it's the key to uncovering the pathways that lead us to actualize our hopes and dreams. By adopting a curious mindset, we we create the conditions for innovation and progress. Curiosity lays the foundation for all that is to follow. That there is a bit of a posture there emotionally. Like
Hmm.
I'm open. If the muse wants to show up and tell me how to write my 275-page book right now and download the whole thing, fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's more a matter of I'm open to. It's more a matter of like being actively open and prepared for the collision of ideas, which is a discipline and a practice more than it is just a matter of circumstance. And I love that you pin it that way.
Yeah, I think curiosity is, you could either, you could accidentally become successful or super creative in one area. But I found that those who display a lifetime of just doing meaningful, curious, creative work are rarely done accidentally. They have a
Yes.
certain mindset or practice that allows them to see the world or details of the world in a way that the average person cannot. And so I think curiosity is a proactive venture, and it's
Yeah.
not something that we should just give away because technology makes it faster or more efficient. If and really good ideas require some type of struggle and some
Yes.
type of wrestling through and
Absolutely.
and time. So those things can't be exactly mimicked, and there's studies to show this about even
No.
generative AI. There's certain original ideas that will only come because we take the time to wrestle with it.
The two things that are popping in my mind is I wrote a short article that I've not published yet because I'm still tinkering with it, in which I reference these two different musicians talking about their processes, and one of which is Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins, who says in an interview that the reason he doesn't use AI models in his creative process is because the struggle is the thing for him. Like the wrestling match, the soul searching, like is the thing. And then on the other side of that, even sitting in meetings with in corporate boardrooms and more businessy mind folks, the way like folks will like use the AI software to capture notes. And while I understand the expedience of that, I've noticed like just believing that the machine heard the right things and then put the right emphasis. This is the important stuff. Bypasses that curiosity. That something in my spirit, something in my brain goes, "Hey Tom, you just said something, and I don't know. Can you say that?" Like there's something about like it bypasses that process that I think actually makes like deep business really work. The machine just told you this is what's important. But curiosity runs deeper than that because you don't know why it's important. Yeah. You're not sure why that's actually sparking something in you. You're not sure why that's sticking out and why you can't stop thinking about what we just said. And so to sort of it does different math.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you know, curiosity will help us with our critical thinking. Critical thinking just can't be developed because you want to quickly develop it. I think you have to literally think about things deeply from multiple angles, and that just takes time. Yes. And, you know, we're going to see that, you know, especially as AI continues to exponentially grow. And there's definitely benefits around maybe tasks and workflow. But I hope people don't give up their ability to critically think. And you know, a lot of, whether you're creative or not, I think everyone's creative to some level. You know, there's a thing called like things like intuition, lived experience, those kinds of things that really require literally time to bring into some type of conversation or innovation process. And so, you know, but a big part of that is like staying curious. Like if we cease to be curious and give our keys of our curiosity and our critical thinking to a machine, I think we're going to be in serious trouble as a society.
Big time. The second piece of your framework, maybe for me, it was a kind of the most, I don't know, scandalous piece. You talk about this. You talk about the skill of effective implementation, and the fact that you use the word skill maybe differently than a lot of folks will use the word skill, but this particular pairing of implementation as a skill is, I think, really helpful. I think it's really redemptive for folks who, and the chapter, the section I'm going to read here is really written very specifically to people who do struggle with implementation. And calling it a skill really helps, to me, it helps me have language for folks who've been stuck with this, who have some blocks. If it's a skill, it can be developed. If it's a skill, I can learn it. I can learn to implement. I can learn to execute. Versus the way a lot of us end up being taught is they're just folks, we call them Enneagram 8s. They just do things and they just execute, and you know, and 5s and 2s just kind of sit and wait and help. That like instead of it being a character trait, this is just who you are. Some people implement. Some people are just doers. Calling implementation a skill. Can you talk about how you've seen that actually play out, and specifically if you can think of ways in which you've watched people move from maybe stuckness to a regular pattern of implementation?
Yeah, I think, you know, in my experience, just in my own life and as well as others, I mean, I grew up in a very, you know, an immigrant home. And so it was all about the hustle. It was all about like creating products and businesses. And my parents did a really good job of I probably, you know, caught more than they taught me. You know, it was probably caught than taught, but they did a really good job of exemplifying like how to go after something and implementing well. But it took intentional effort for me periodically to ask my mother, like, how did you do payroll? How did you take it? And I was a kid. I was just curious, like, how do you take care of your employees? You know, I noticed one day that she gave one of her employees a car so they could get to work. And I was like, wow, where did that generosity come from? Or just kind of thinking through that. And I realized, like, even though you may have a knack for getting things done, creating systems around your ability to get things done is highly effective. And it actually produces kind of results. So first, I try to get people out of their own stereotype their own box of what they
It's
are
good.
saying that, well, I'm just creative, I'm just a leader, I'm really good at delegating, but I want to get other people to do the work. But I always tell them, like, unless you have empathy of what the actual execution requires, it's going to be hard to lead effectively, for example.
Yes.
So I think everybody should learn how to implement better, how
I
to
love the
think
last
about
line.
it.
The last line of the section is, again, the a lot of my work has to do with like formative thinking, who you're
Hmm.
becoming while you're doing the work is like kind of the cornerstone of what I'm up to. You say at the tail end, it's not, I'll read the whole thing. Ultimately, a strong implementation skill sets not only a skill set, sorry, ultimately a strong implementation skill set not only drives results, but also fosters confidence in the
Hmm.
value you're delivering in the world.
Yeah.
That there really is this like emotional kind of constipation. Like we have like all these ideas in our head and we
Yeah.
have executed on none of them. And part of what it ends up doing is it erodes our confidence
Absolutely.
that I have not done. It's like having all the unfinished. It's like a stack of unfinished dishes, or the unfinished. I've started 3 degrees and I haven't finished it. It's at some point not executing starts to erode my confidence and it actually kind of
Exactly.
squashes my spirit. So the way you write this, the whole paragraph is fantastic. Implementation is the cornerstone skill set of the actualize phase. It's more
Hmm.
than just acting on an idea and hoping things work out, which is absolutely the way it's taught. Just do it. It's the
Yeah.
Nike taught us to
Yeah.
just go do it. You'll find 250
Yeah.
miles. You'll be fine. Rather, it's the ability to translate purpose into tangible outcomes through clear goals, strategic prioritization, measurable actions, well-crafted tactical plans, and a deep commitment. This is the key: deep commitment to the practice of iterative refinement.
Yeah.
The Again, like the way you flush out, like implementation is a skill set that someone can develop, and
Yes.
it comes before the confidence piece,
Yep.
which is the flip of the personality driven business or creativity world, in which like these personalities just implement and they're butt kickers and that's who they are. And then
Yeah.
these folks can help those people. And everyone gets stuck in that framework. I really, really like the redemptive way you frame this. I think it's very helpful.
It's great. I think the idea there, and I think this is what you're getting at, is the drive in that phase is called proof. And it's the whole idea of not just implementing, but moving from a proof of concept of something to a proof of value.
That's
To
good.
get it to a place where you know it's valuable for whoever you're interacting with. If you could get your work to a place where you know what you're bringing to the table and what value it's producing for the individual, and value is usually created one or both ways. One is you remove a pain point for somebody, or you create a gain for them. And so to be able to show up and deliver value, you're going to walk into rooms with confidence because you've actually done the work.
Yes.
And I think when people show up like that, it just takes it to a different level. People will start
100%.
trusting you just implicitly, and they'll start listening to you because you're going to communicate and show up in a way that people are going to sense that this person actually knows what they're talking about. So I think
Yes.
that's a powerful place to be in idea execution.
Agreed. The final piece of the framework, final facet of the framework, has to do with influence, and
Hmm.
what a choice of words.
That was a struggle. That we
Yeah,
went through lots of
I
arguments
would.
around the word. Yeah.
And so instead of doing what would be very easy and cliche here is to talk about the difference between influencers and what you're talking about, because I
Yeah.
think that story might kind of tell itself. And if you don't know yeah, that's fine. We'll get into that maybe some other time. But this the cornerstone piece in this chapter for me has to do with what you call the mindset of contribution.
Mhm.
I love the word contribution. My one of my work partners and I have been doing a project for the last like year and a half around creative practices as kind of like as a kind of a life remedy for things like depression and anxiety.
Mm.
And one of the shifts we've pushed our folks towards is like, instead of trying to create a product, don't try to create a product, but actually just simply make a contribution. That if you can move
Mm.
to a place in which like what I'm doing is I'm making a contribution, it changes the relationship between between myself, my ideas, my skill sets, and the world around me. If the layer between me and the world around me is product based, is is result based, I tend to get jammed up. But the idea of contribution is more organic. It's more human. It's a little more redemptive. It has kind of has the depth of maybe meaning to it. So I'm going to read this, and I'd love for you to vamp a little bit more on it. Influence in this context of contribution has little to do with social frame, material accumulation, or positions of power. Instead, it's the quiet, profound impact of a life lived in service to others. True influence is born from contribution. It's the result of showing up, living generously, and trusting that your actions, no matter how small, can contribute to our world. This feels a little bit like kind of the soul of the book.
Absolutely.
Talk about contribution as maybe something different than productivity, or something different than sales, or something different than success. What is contribution, and why is it so important?
I heard this phrase once, and this is years ago when B corporations were kind of the talk of these social impact businesses or enterprises, and there's a phrase that stuck with me over the years where it says, it's really shifting from being the best in the world in something to be the best for the world in something.
That's good.
And that's really the spirit of the third phase called influence. And that is like posturing ourselves away from just, because at the end of the day, all of our accolades, awards, recognitions, and things like that will all fade away. Most people will forget us. That's just the reality of human existence. But I think people will remember, at least in your circle, your immediate family, friends, maybe in specific verticals that you had some influence or presence in. People remember how we made them feel, what kind of human being we were. And it's a powerful concept to be able to do that. And on top of that, if you could help somebody who, without your participation or contribution, they may not have experienced the kind of life they now have. That's just a powerful human thing that I, couldn't fathom. Like years ago in one of our conferences, I recently ran into this lovely leader in Africa, and he came to one of our events, and I just felt like during that time, like, hey, this person has a vision to keep adoptions in country in Ethiopia, instead of seeing so many kids leave the country to international adoption. And he wanted to mobilize people to start adopting in country. So at one of our conferences, we took up, a donation, and we gave him just a few $1,000s to go hopefully share that philosophy with leaders in the country. And then I just randomly ran into him literally in Birmingham, Alabama, a couple of weeks ago while doing a book event.
Of course.
And he was there fundraising for an organization that we're both connected to. And he said, I just want you to know, Charles, and my wife was there, like, we've had over 5,000 kids adopted in Ethiopia, and it's changed the landscape of adoption in Ethiopia. And, I'm not like, there was no reason for me to tap myself in the back, because I felt like he did all the work, right? Yeah. He did the tough part of executing on that. All I did was, at one moment, I thought contribution was better than just self-platforming what we were doing. You just don't know what happens when it's more than just developing products and services.
Yes.
And the impact you can make in someone else's life, and probably a lot of people listening to this have already made that impact that they have no idea about.
No.
And it's because you chose to think about contribution.
That goes to how I wanted to land this plane. And to have made the decision to write the book, to have doing the work you do, you're starting to touch on this. The cheesy way to say it would be that you're starting to touch on this in sort of a sentimental way. Why does it matter? So, why does it matter? If the push here is to design a good life. You want to design your good life. This is when I say this question out loud, there's a part of my brain that's like, this is a silly question to ask. Because of course it matters, but I've been in like the business of like meaning and purpose for years, whether it was like creativity, pastoring a church, etc., coaching, like. But boy, maybe more so than I can remember, there really is this odd is not the word, this frightening lack of purpose, lack of meaning, and kind of a detachment, like a broad cultural quitting. And so why does it matter? Why does it matter to you that other people design their lives and design their lives to be good? And why should it matter to them? Why should it matter that someone does this?
Yeah, I think twofold. One, I think it matters to people right now because I think we are in an inflection point in, I think, human history because of the technology that we're experiencing and the geopolitical situations we're in. That I think meaning is something as to like why we do what we do is essential to really pressing forward into the future of humanity. And I think it matters to individuals because I feel like, at the end of the day, what brings us deep sense of fulfillment as human beings, a sense of like wholeness or a sense of joy, all those kinds of things are often aligned to things we ultimately care about. And so at two levels, at the individual level and as the human race, I feel like thinking about what really matters to us is timely. And I think it's much needed because the world is getting too easy not to care about that. And I feel like if we're not careful, we're going to let go of something that makes us uniquely human. And I think that would be sad existence. So there's something beautiful about thinking about that. And then if we do this well, we're going to benefit a ton of people because if we live our lives in the way that we are, desiring to live, or some people would say designed to live, I think it will help other fellow human beings on this planet who desperately need the connection and really the mutual benefit we're going to receive by helping others.
Yes. And while this might not be the fundamentally root true of absolutely everyone, I think specifically for my audience and for a lot of folks, this line you just dropped, I love this, says the world is getting too easy to not think about it. It is like purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
That it is getting to, if it's about accomplishment, if it's about achievement, if it's about productivity, all those things are about to get really, really easy.
Yeah.
And I think, this is part of what I do too, I think we're going to find ourselves in a much deeper existential crisis than we know how to handle. And we're going to need tools and language for those dark little corners we're going to find ourselves in. And it's like, why I've accomplished so much. I've done everything on my list. Why am I miserable? Like, why do I not feel good? And so learning to ask the question and like, okay, purpose and meaning. And what your book does is it provides a very actionable, it provides handles for the crisis that I think folks are moving into, because it's not just about getting things done. One of my favorite books forever ago is Scott Belsky's book about making ideas happen. It's a fantastic book.
Yeah.
And part of what I left the book missing was like it's great that you're getting a lot of these things done, but if I get hooked on this productivity piece, I'm going to miss a lot of the why. I'm going to miss a lot of the purpose and meaning. And so I like what you've done with the book. I love what you've been up to for a long time with ideation. We're glad to have you on the show. So thanks for being here, man.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Thank you for the conversation and your insights as well.
You're welcome.